My name is Dr. Jamie Laws, and I'm from Toronto, Canada.
And what is the miracle story you want to share with us today?
I want to share an experience that I had working at the Olympic Games in Seoul, Korea in 1988. And so the story that I want to share with you has to do with a Canadian athlete on the men's rowing team, on the heavy eight, who had been part of the crew that won a gold medal in Los Angeles in 1984. And this crew was favored to go on and win a gold medal in Korea. But about 6 weeks before the crew was going to go, this particular athlete had injured himself in the boat, had injured his lower back, and initially had been advised that if he just took some time off, that things would probably settle down, that it was just a very bad muscle spasm and it would probably be okay. The short story is that it wasn't okay, and he saw the medical doctors associated with the team, and he got I think he got a lot of good advice, but unfortunately it wasn't advice that was able to help him get back into the boat and able to row again. And at that time, I was treating a number of athletes from who were on the Canadian team, and their training center at the time was in St. Catharines, Ontario. And they would come up from St. Catharines periodically to see me in Toronto and be adjusted and be treated chiropractically. When this particular athlete wasn't making the kind of recovery that he should make, they suggested that he come. And he did. He didn't come until he was basically told by the medical staff that they really didn't think he was going to be able to compete in Korea. And for someone who's been training for 4 years in order to compete in the Olympics, to have someone say, "We're sorry, but our considered opinion is that you're just not going to be able to do it," you know, at that point, people start to look for alternatives. It's not that they haven't already tried things, but if the things they've tried haven't worked, they start looking to see what else might be possible. So he came up to see me in St. Catharines. He was driven up by one of the other athletes that I was taking care of. And he came up and I said, "The first day that you come, just come up and be prepared to spend the day." And I started by seeing him in the morning and did a thorough consultation and examination, had a look at what the problems were, had a look at the reports and the films that had already been taken, determined that I thought there were more films that should be taken, and arranged to have that done. But essentially, I started looking at what needed to be done in order to correct the problems, not just with his low back, but the mechanical problems that existed elsewhere in the spine. Because he was not the kind of person who just simply had one problem, one area that was subluxated, one area that was mechanically not functioning the way that it was meant to function. He had a number of areas where things weren't right. And as a consequence, that first day, I basically saw him about 6 times during the course of the day to make corrections and build one treatment on top of the other. Now, often and normally in a typical healthcare setting, you wouldn't see somebody many times in the same day. And there are all kinds of insurance reasons, because insurance companies often say you can only go once a day or whatever. Workers' compensation is like that. But when you are dealing with athletes, the athletes aren't concerned about the insurance aspect of it. They're concerned with what makes a difference in terms of getting well. There are also a lot of doctors who have a busy schedule and have difficulty scheduling in the same person more than once in the same day. But when you have a significant problem, being adjusted chiropractically, having that reviewed and being adjusted again several times in the same day makes a lot of sense. And so for highly competitive athletes, there's huge value in being treated chiropractically more than once in the same day. In any event, I saw him 6 times that first day. The second day he came in, and again I saw him several times that day. By the third day, his improvement was so good that he was actually able to get down into the boat and sit in the seat in the boat. Now, that doesn't mean he was pain-free, and it doesn't mean that he was able to start rowing yet, but it signaled that there was very significant recovery because posturally he was able to assume the kind of position that he hadn't been able to assume for over 4 weeks. And so at that point, we continued to treat him and continued to treat him very aggressively in terms of the frequency of care and the length of time we spent with him on each visit. And the short story, the miracle is that he was able to go to Korea and he was able to compete for Canada and he was able to do what he needed to do. And so that in itself is a miracle and a great success story. But it leads to the second part of the miracle, because as a result of doing that, the Canadian rowing team asked me if I would go to Korea to be the team chiropractor for the rowing team. And when I went to Korea, and again, I think often miracles are things that you don't expect are going to happen. When I went to Korea, I was looking after the Canadian rowing team, and I was in the rowing basin late one day, and there weren't very many people there, but there was an American crew, there was an American quad crew that was training. And one of the athletes in the crew got his finger jammed in the oar lock and was quite badly injured and had dislocated the finger and had torn the nail bed out of the bed. The nail had pulled right out of the bed, which is incredibly painful. And if you can imagine somebody who has to hold on to an oar and pull with the oar, pull with their hands, clearly this is something that needs to be attended to. They'd already reached the point in the competition where he couldn't be substituted for, even if he was injured. And so you're now not just affecting that one athlete, but you're affecting the entire crew. And I was really the only person on site at the basin at the time who had the kind of training that could really be of help. So I told him that if he would like me to, I would be willing to do as much as I could to help him, that certainly there would be some pain involved, but that I was prepared to reduce the dislocation, and I was prepared to reinsert the nail bed if that's what he wanted me to do. With his permission, I then went ahead and treated him. And once I'd reduced the dislocation and put the nail bed back in place, I then applied pressure to it, packed it in ice, and we made arrangements for him to be taken by ambulance back to the main Olympic Village and made arrangements for him to be taken to his team doctors with the U.S. team. And I figured I had done what I could do for that athlete. He was then seen by his own team doctors, and he was told that if I hadn't done what was done, there would be no chance of him being able to hold an oar. The story gets better, because he was able to hold an oar, and he was able to compete in the final at the Olympic Games in Korea, and his team won a bronze medal. And at the medal ceremonies, he came and sought me out to show me the bronze medal and say that he knows that if I hadn't done what was done, his team doctors told him that if that hadn't been done, he wouldn't have been able to get in the boat, and the boat would have been disqualified. So those kinds of exciting things happen in sport. They happen in everyday life, but when they happen in sport and they happen in Olympic Games, it's a huge miracle, and it's a huge win for the athlete who's able to succeed in that kind of a situation. And it's a miracle for chiropractic.